those lists were given to them by Americans. Disloyal Americans, Americans who have no natural affection for the country, Americans who don't care. And how many times since I brought that prophecy out in 2021, how many times have we seen on TV military personnel busted, health personnel busted for giving information to Russia? That thing, this one aspect of these prophecies has made the news so many times. And the highest class of people who try to give, some of them have been successful, some of them have not. The biggest group of people who try to give away classified information to the Russians is always the military. It's always the military. That they catch Colonel this or Private that or Captain this was caught. There was a couple that were handling sensitive information of Marines or Army or something like that. And here in America, the man identified as a woman. So he had quite a decent rank in the Army, and he used to wear his hair in a ponytail, and he identified as a woman. But when it came time to do secret exchanges with the Kremlin, all of a sudden he wanted to be called by his male name, and he was identifying as a male. Such an interesting small snippet. I thought it was a very interesting aspect, because one of the things that God has said is that when the Russians come here, they will not tolerate this trans business. They will not tolerate this, you're born Stephen, but you're calling yourself Susie Q. It will not be tolerated at all. And I found it very interesting that a man who fought for his right to be trans in the American Army, when he thought he was dealing with Russian operatives, because it was actually the FBI or the CIA doing a sting operation to try and target what they suspect are weaknesses in the military. So they set up a fake sting operation and they pretended to be Russians. And this man and his wife could not wait to offer them the entire set of military records of America's soldiers. Whenever this man was communicating with what he thought were Russians, he always called himself he. So he didn't want to be she, her. He wanted to be he, him. Very interesting. We just see all the little tidbits, how the small details that are in this prophecy, that are in these prophecies, always show up in the press. So the people who know that God is speaking here are the people who read the prophecies, listen to the videos, and then I always told you, you will always see everything on TV. I won't be there. The TV will tell you that what you're watching here is true. And so they have marked their targets everywhere in the country. God says they have marked the national parks. They know the hospitals. They know people's families because they've captured a lot of the social media information. And they will hit, especially on the coasts of the nation. Ships will be here on the western flank of America, and bombs will fall on the eastern seaboard. So that's the Statue of Liberty side. That's the Maryland, Virginia, New York City, New Jersey, Philly side. And God says that these two nations, Russia and China, are perfecting their plans against America, which means that they have the plans already, but because the time is not yet for them to strike, they're simply troubleshooting it. They're making it more perfect than perfect than perfect, but the hour has not come to actually launch the plans. And when they do, every country in the world will see how Atlantis falls. Atlantis is an ancient civilization that completely went off the rails, completely went into a smorgasbord of sin. So every sin that you could think of, those people were doing it, and their greatest and highest sin, the sin that you reach, there are two sins actually historically. When you get there, God is always going to decide that the entire civilization is a bust, and he will usually annihilate that. That is the sin of homosexuality. When a nation has reached an apex of sexuality, aberrant sexuality, perverted sexuality, where people want children, that is one of the reasons that God will destroy a civilization, where people want their same sex, man wants man and woman wants man, instead of crossing for man to want woman as God intended. And when people also begin to lay with beasts, when people begin to get caught laying with their pets, laying with their dogs, laying with sheep and other things like that. Yes, once sexuality becomes perverted, God will always destroy that nation. Greeks definitely fell for that, and Pompeii was destroyed for that. They were rampant in loving children, pederasty, pedophilia, and homosexuality. But also on the other side, once you begin to deal with fallen creatures, once you begin to traffic with fallen angels, you begin to traffic with otherworldly beasts, Nephilim, aliens, things like that, then yes, God will always wipe out that society. And Atlantis, the city, very advanced city, they used to have so many highly advanced gadgets and things like that they were getting from interacting with the fallen ones. They had committed both sins. They were sexually immoral. They were definitely outside the confines of what God calls acceptable sexuality. And they were dealing with the fallen. And Atlantis was destroyed in a single day. They went under the sea, and to this day, that civilization has not been found. America is guilty of the same sins that Atlantis was guilty of, and that is why in the old prophecies, you will hear her being called Atlantis a lot. And the final destruction of this nation will be that the continental shelf that the United States sits on, I didn't say Mexico and I didn't say Canada, it will break from the others and it will go to the bottom of the sea. The whole thing. God says that in a single day and hour, Atlantis will be judged, and this judgment will be complete with the captivity of all her missile defense systems, which will be inactive and helpless to respond. So if you are not a new subscriber, then you already know that God says that all America's radar detector things and all her missiles that are supposed to, we will give a swift response. There's going to be no response because those things are going to be deactivated. And that is because, again, unrighteous people who are American born in the nation have given the codes to paralyze the defense systems to the enemy, Russia and China. The White House doesn't know anything about this. And God says that even if they did, America, the leadership, does not believe that this nation could ever face a threat that is bad enough that could lead to a war where America could lose. So that is many layers of deception. The government is ignorant that she has enemies that are planning to fight her. That's one layer of deception, to not know anything when you have enemies. But then there's the complacency. God says that they don't believe that America could ever face a threat substantial enough to result in war. In other words, American leadership does not believe that she can ever get into a spat, a talking match, an argument that can ever be big enough to lead to a war. And that is deception, because God has said that America will have her own war. America is going to have her own civil war before anybody comes here to fight her. That's part of the reason why it will be so easy to beat this country, because she will be tired from years. Minimum 3 years, God has said. The American Civil War will last a minimum of 3 years. And that is minimum, with people praying and fasting and asking God for it not to happen. If people take it seriously, pray and fast, then 3 years is the minimum threshold of that war. So imagine leadership, whether current or historically, that doesn't believe that America could ever end up in a war with anyone. In other words, America doesn't believe that anyone could ever attack her. And then a threat substantial enough to result